My son Mitchell's voice sliced through the Tuesday afternoon, quiet, sharp, and unexpected. "Mom, is your boyfriend there? Is Dominic at the house right now?" The question hit me with such force I nearly fumbled my reading glasses into the lukewarm coffee sitting on my side table. I glanced up toward the ceiling of my Baltimore home, where the rhythmic sound of running water from the master bathroom had been a comforting background noise for the last 20 minutes. "Yes, he's here," I said, a little confused by Mitchell's tone. "He's just in the shower. Why? Is everything all right at the hotel?" A heavy sigh came through the phone. Mitchell's hotel manager voice was on, the one he used for difficult guests, not his mother. "Mom, that's impossible." "What's impossible, sweetheart? I can hear the water running." "No, it's impossible because I'm looking right at him. He's standing at my check-in desk, not 10 feet away from me. He's with a woman, Mom, a redhead. A young one." My blood didn't just run cold. It froze solid. The porcelain coffee cup rattled against the saucer as I set it down next to my worn copy of Wuthering Heights. 8 months. 8 months of what I thought was a gentle, loving relationship suddenly felt like a trapdoor opening beneath my feet. "Mitchell, you must be mistaken," I whispered, though my heart was starting to hammer. "Dominic Prescott has a common look, silver hair, blue eyes. He's signing the credit card slip right now, Mom. Dominic R. Prescott. He just handed the bellman a 50. He's laughing. It's him. Who in the hell is in your shower?" The sound of the water upstairs abruptly stopped. And then I heard footsteps. They weren't Dominic's. Dominic wore size 11 wingtips that made a solid, confident thud on my hardwood floors. These footsteps were light, hesitant, and soft-soled. "Mitchell," I whispered into the phone, my eyes locked on the hallway entrance. "I have to call you back." I didn't hang up. I just set the phone on the table, face up, the line still open. I turned slowly, my breath caught in my throat, my heart feeling like a trapped bird. Standing in the archway to my living room was a young woman I had never seen before. She was maybe 30, with long strawberry blonde hair and wide, terrified green eyes. She was holding a designer handbag in one hand and a set of keys in the other. My keys. "Oh my God," she breathed, her hand flying to her mouth. "You're not supposed to be here. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you." The sheer audacity of it almost made me laugh. If I weren't so terrified, I might have. This stranger, this child, was standing in the middle of my living room, telling me I wasn't supposed to be in my own house. "Excuse me," I managed, my voice sounding strained and high. I gripped the back of my armchair. "Who are you? And what are you doing in my home?" The woman's face went from shocked to ghostly pale. She glanced frantically toward the stairs, then back at me. I'm Sabrina. Sabrina Chavez. Dominic said..." He told me this was his house. The pieces of Mitchell's call and this woman's presence slammed together in my mind, forming a picture of grotesque clarity. "He told you this was his house?" She nodded miserably, holding up the silver key dangling from the chain in her hand. It looked exactly like the spare I had given Dominic last month, for emergencies. "He gave me this 3 weeks ago," she said, her voice trembling. "He said he lived alone. He said he was traveling for business this week and that I could use his place while my apartment was being fumigated. He said you were the housekeeper." The housekeeper. The rage that flashed through me was so hot it almost choked me. I wasn't just a mark, I was a prop. I was the hired help in the background of his other life. "He's been lying to you, Sabrina," I said, surprised by the sudden, cold steadiness in my own voice. "What do you mean?" she whispered. "He's upstairs." "No, he's not," I said, gesturing to the silent upstairs landing. "Whoever is up there, it isn't Dominic. Dominic is currently checking into the Montclair Hotel with another woman." Sabrina's face crumpled. "Another... what? No, that's not possible. He told me he loved me. Oh, honey, I said, moving away from the chair. I think he's been telling us both a lot of things. As if on cue, we both heard a door open upstairs. Heavy footsteps, a man's but not Dominic's, moved across the upstairs hallway heading toward the main landing. Sabrina and I froze, staring at each other like two deer caught in the same set of headlights. "He doesn't know you know about me, does he?" Sabrina whispered urgently. I shook my head. "And he doesn't know I know about you. Or about the woman at the hotel." A figure appeared at the top of the stairs, silhouetted against the hall light. For the first time in 8 months, I smiled, and there was absolutely no warmth in it. This man, whoever he was about to have the worst day of his life. But then the man stepped into the light, and my world tilted all over again. It was Dominic. He descended the stairs wearing nothing but one of my monogrammed bath towels slung low around his waist. His silver hair was damp and perfectly combed, even fresh from the shower. The man had remarkable, infuriating confidence. I had to give him that. He glided down the staircase like he owned it, which, I reminded myself, he had apparently claimed he did. "Ladies," his voice floated down, smooth as aged whiskey. What a pleasant surprise. His blue eyes, the ones I'd thought were so kind, moved between Sabrina and me with a practiced, almost bored calm. He was acting as if finding 2 women waiting for him in his girlfriend's living room was a perfectly normal Tuesday afternoon. "Matilda, darling," he said, reaching the bottom step. He leaned in to kiss my cheek, and I recoiled. The scent of my late husband's expensive sandalwood cologne, which he had been using, filling my nostrils. Even his smell was a theft. "You're home early," he said, not missing a beat. He then turned to Sabrina, his smile paternal and condescending. "And Sabrina, what a treat! I thought you were visiting your sister in Annapolis this week." I watched the performance with a sort of cold, grudging admiration. The man was a professional. He wasn't even rattled. He was simply shifting his weight, juggling us both in real time. "Actually, Dominic," I said, setting my hands on my hips, "Sabrina and I have been having the most interesting conversation." His smile flickered. Just for a millisecond. "Oh, yes," Sabrina chimed in, finding her voice. It was shaky, but it was there. "We were just talking about how you told me this was your house, and about how you gave her a key to my front door," I added, my voice like ice. Dominic's towel chose that exact moment to slip slightly. He grabbed it with both hands, his composure finally cracking. For the first time since I'd met him at that grief support group, he looked genuinely startled. "Now, girls, there's obviously been some confusion," he said, his voice losing its smooth baritone. He was trying to regain control, to separate and conquer. "Sabrina, why don't you head on upstairs? Pack your things and I'll come up and explain everything. Let me talk to Matilda privately." "No." The word came out sharper and louder than I'd intended. "Sabrina stays right here. We're going to have this conversation all together." Dominic's jaw tightened. "Matilda, this is a private matter. Let's not air this." "Like you privately discussed giving away my spare key?" I shot back. "Or like you privately drove my car to meet her? Or are we talking about another kind of private?" I took a breath, letting the killing blow land. "You've been busy, Dominic. My son, Mitchell, the manager at the Montclair, remember? He just called me. He just watched you check into his hotel. So who is Rowena Mercado?" The color drained from his face. The mention of a third specific name was the one thing he hadn't prepared for. He stood there, clutching my towel, his silver-haired charm gone. He was just a naked, older man caught in a lie. He looked, for the first time, like what he was, a fraud. Dominic Prescott seemed to deflate. The smooth, confident posture evaporated, and he sank onto my grandmother's antique settee like a puppet with its strings cut. The towel slipped again, and this time he barely bothered to adjust it. All the polished charm was gone, leaving behind someone who looked older, more tired, and pathetically human. "My name isn't David Prescott," he began, his voice barely a whisper. Sabrina gasped. "What?" I just nodded. I'd already suspected as much. "Then who are you?" "It's Damien Montgomery," he said, running his hands through his damp hair. "And I'm not a retired investment advisor. It's all been a lie." He looked up, his blue eyes watery and pleading. He was starting a new performance. This was the confession. "I'm a caregiver," he said, his voice cracking. "Or I was. My mother had Alzheimer's. Severe, late stage. I took care of her for 12 years, ever since my father died. I used up all my savings, sold my house, cashed in my retirement accounts. Everything went to her medical care, to the nursing homes. Despite the white-hot anger in my chest, I felt a tiny, unwelcome flicker of sympathy. I'd watched friends go through that exact ringer. It was a story designed to disarm a woman like me. When she died last year," Damien continued, a single tear rolling down his cheek, "I had nothing left. No home, no savings, no job prospects at 58. The grief support groups, they weren't just for meeting women. I really was grieving. But I was also desperate. I was homeless." "So you decided to start conning widows," Sabrina said, her voice dripping with ice. "It wasn't supposed to be like that," he insisted, looking at me, then at her. "It started small. I met a woman at a group in Catonsville, Evelyn. She had this big empty house, just like this one. She was lonely. I was lonely. She invited me to stay for a few days. It felt mutual. Companionship for her, a roof for me." "But it escalated," I said, finishing the thought. I could see the pattern now. Evelyn introduced me to her friend Josephine. Josephine introduced me to her neighbor. Each one had needs I could meet. A companion, a handyman, a partner. And each one had resources I desperately needed. I never meant for it to become this. He studied my face, looking for any sign of forgiveness. "How many?" I asked quietly. He closed his eyes. The picture of shame. "Currently, 7. 7 women, Matilda. But what I have with you, what we have, that's the real one. I swear it. The others were just survival." He was still lying. He was trying to make me the special one, the one he really loved, the one who would save him. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I let the silence hang in the room for a long, heavy moment. I let him sit there in his pathetic, manufactured shame. I let Sabrina stare at him, her expression a mask of raw hurt and disgust. Then I walked past him. I went to the antique writing desk in the corner of the living room, the one that had belonged to my grandmother. I pulled open the bottom drawer and took out a thick, beige manila folder. "Save the tears, Damien," I said, my voice flat. "Or Dominic. Or whoever you really are." I turned and faced him, holding the folder. His watery eyes snapped up, the fake grief replaced by a flash of genuine confusion, and, for the first time, a flicker of fear. "What's that?" he asked. "You've been sloppy," I said. "You think I'm just a retired old English teacher, don't you? Someone who grades papers and bakes cookies. I taught a forensics and critical thinking elective for 10 years, you idiot. I know how to spot a liar." I tossed the folder onto the coffee table in front of him. It landed with a heavy thud. "Your stories about your investments never quite added up. The timelines were wrong. The terminology was just a little off. You said you worked for a firm that dissolved in 2008, but I found their incorporation papers from 2010. You've been careless." Sabrina looked from the folder to me, her eyes wide. "I hired a private investigator 3 weeks ago," I announced. Dominic's face went white. This was not part of his script. "He's been watching you visit Sabrina at her apartment, watching you meet Rowena for lunches at the Inner Harbor, watching you go to Catonsville to see Evelyn." I opened the folder. Inside were photographs, bank statements, transaction records. You told me you were just moving assets when you asked for my banking information. You told Evelyn you were consolidating her portfolio. You told Josephine you were helping her with her taxes. You're not just homeless, Damien. You're a thief. I pulled out a summary sheet. According to my investigator, you've been accessing these women's accounts. Small amounts at first. A few hundred here, 1,000 there. Carefully hidden. You've stolen nearly $40,000 in the last 8 months. Sabrina gasped and put her hand to her chest. He told me he needed help with a medical bill. And he told me it was for a down payment on a boat we were going to share, I said. You're a criminal. He just stared at the papers, speechless. The con was over. He was exposed. Now, I said, pulling out a pen and a blank sheet of paper from my desk. You are going to sit right there, in that towel, and you are going to write down the full names and phone numbers of the other 5 women, because you and I are going to call them. We're having a meeting, all of us. By Thursday evening, my dining room table, usually reserved for book clubs and Thanksgiving dinners, was set for the most awkward and hostile party in Baltimore history. 7 women, all of us linked by the same lie, sat under my chandelier, the air thick with tension, shame, and a simmering, unfocused rage. I had called each of them. Evelyn Wallace, 71, from Catonsville, was his first mark. She sat to my right, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her expression rigid. Across from her, Josephine Rivas, 65, clutched a tissue and looked like she was about to be sick. I just feel so stupid, Josephine whispered for the 3rd time since arriving. We all feel stupid, Jo, a sharp voice cut in. Priscilla Chambers. At 59, she was the youngest after Sabrina and clearly the angriest. She was a VP at a logistics company, and she radiated an impatient, sharp-edged energy. But feeling stupid doesn't help. Action helps. Sabrina sat next to Priscilla, seemingly drawing strength from her. The other 2, Rowena Mercado, the redhead from the hotel, and Loretta Thornton, sat in stunned silence, still processing the sheer scale of the deception. Ladies, I said, standing at the head of the table. I felt like I was addressing a faculty meeting gone horribly wrong. Thank you for coming. As you all now know, we have a serious problem. A man calling himself Damien Montgomery or Dominic Prescott has systematically lied to, manipulated, and stolen from all of us. I slid copies of my investigator's report down the table. He has stolen a combined $40,800. The question is, what are we going to do about it? Call the police, Rowena said immediately. Press charges. Send the bastard to prison. That's one option, I agreed. But before we do that, I have to tell you what my investigator told me this afternoon. I paused, letting their eyes meet mine. He can't find a Damien Montgomery or Dominic Prescott that matches this man. No social security number, no credit history, no official records. He's a ghost. He's using a false identity. Which means, Evelyn said, her eyes sharp, that prosecuting him is useless. He'll just disappear. Exactly, I said. We can't get justice until we know who he really is. And how do you propose we do that? Priscilla Chambers asked. Her voice wasn't collaborative. It was accusatory. She stood up, her dark eyes fixed on me. I'm not buying this. Any of it. The table went silent. Priscilla, what are you talking about? I asked. This whole concerned leader routine. It's very noble, she said, her words dripping with sarcasm. You discover this con right as your son spots him. You happen to have a private investigator. You happen to have all the answers. How convenient. She pointed a finger at me. How do we know you're not his partner? A collective gasp went around the table. That's absurd, I said, my face flushing. Is it? Priscilla shot back, her voice rising. I know this type. I've seen this con before. There's always a lead wife. The older, respectable one. The one who sets the hook, who makes him look legitimate. the one who does damage control when things get messy and who gets the biggest cut. You think I stole from you? Josephine whispered, looking at me with new horror. I think it's a possibility, Priscilla said. My Aunt Madeline, she was conned by a man just like this, years ago in Arizona. Lost everything. Her best friend, the woman who introduced them, turned out to be his partner. She was the one who cleared out the bank accounts while my aunt was crying on her shoulder. You called us, Matilda. You controlled the flow of information. You're trying to silence us so you two can run. I stood there, stunned and speechless. I had brought them here to form an army, and instead I had started a civil war. I am not his partner, I said, my voice shaking with rage. Prove it, Priscilla sneered. Until you do, I'm out, and I'm going to my own lawyer. I wouldn't trust you to water my plants, let alone get my money back. She grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming my front door behind her. The alliance was broken before it had even begun. The other women looked at me, their faces a new mixture of doubt and fear. I was back at square one, but now I wasn't just a victim. I was a suspect. For 2 days, I was paralyzed. Priscilla's accusation had shattered the group. Josephine and Loretta were terrified, calling me every few hours to ask if I'd heard from Damien and if their money was really gone. Evelyn, Rowena, and Sabrina were on my side, but they were jumpy. The trust was gone. My private investigator, a former cop named Phillips, had been digging nonstop. This guy's good, Tilly, he'd said, using my old nickname. Priscilla's accusation has me thinking, what if he's bigger than we thought? I'm running deep searches on federal databases, not just local. On Saturday afternoon, my phone rang. It was Phillips. He was breathing hard. Got him, Tilly. I got the bastard. My heart leaped. What? Who is he? Priscilla was right about one thing. Phillips said, his voice grim. This guy is a major league player. Damien Montgomery is a fake. Dominic Prescott is a fake. His real name is Theodore Bartholomew Harding. The name sounded ridiculous, like something from a Victorian novel. Who is he? He's a ghost, Phillips said. But I found him. He's been running cons on seniors and widows for 30 years. I'm looking at an FBI file on him that's a mile long. We're talking 12 states, dozens of aliases, millions of dollars. He's wanted, Tilly. He's wanted. This was it. This was the smoking gun. This wasn't a civil matter for a local lawyer. This was a federal case. The file, I said, my mind racing. Does it have his real information? Proof? It has everything, Phillips said, a note of triumph in his voice. Aliases, mugshots from a '98 arrest in Florida, known associates, financial MOs. It's all here. This is the key. You take this to the FBI, they won't just listen. They'll roll out the red carpet. This guy is one of their white whales. Relief washed over me, so strong my knees went weak. Phillips, you're a miracle worker. Send me that file. Email it, print it, whatever. I'm taking it to the FBI in person on Monday morning. I'll do better, he said. I'm printing the whole thing now. It's thick. Meet me at my office in an hour. You need to hold this in your hand. I'm on my way, I said. I called Evelyn, Sabrina, and Rowena on a conference call. He's real. His name is Theodore Bartholomew Harding, and he's a wanted federal criminal. Phillips has the FBI file. We've got him. I'm going to get the file right now. There was a moment of silence, then a burst of relieved sobs. We had him. We finally had him. I drove to Phillips's small office above a row of shops in Hampton, my hand steady on the wheel for the first time in a week. I felt powerful. I had the truth. Priscilla's words still stung, but this file would be my vindication. This would prove everything. I pulled into the parking lot behind the building and frowned. The back door to his office, which led up a flight of metal stairs, was slightly ajar. Phillips was meticulous about security. A knot of dread tightened in my stomach. "Phillips!" I called out, climbing the stairs. The door swung open with a metallic groan. I stepped inside. The office was destroyed. Filing cabinets were overturned, papers scattered everywhere like snow. The computer monitor was smashed, the tower ripped open, its hard drive gone. The printer was in pieces on the floor. "Phillips!" I screamed, rushing into the main room. He was on the floor behind his desk, breathing, thank God, but his face was bruised and he was cradling his left arm. "Tilly, get out of here," he groaned, wincing in pain. "What happened? I'm calling 911. No police, not yet." He struggled to sit up, his face pale with shock. He was here, Harding. He must have followed me from the database search, or he followed you. My blood ran cold. He was here? He did this? "It wasn't a robbery, Tilly," Phillips choked out, gesturing with his good hand. "It was surgical. He didn't take my wallet, didn't touch the petty cash. He came for one thing." My eyes scanned the disaster of a room. The file. He took the hard copies, the flash drive I'd backed it up on, and the hard drive from the main computer. He wiped the server. "It's all gone, Tilly. The Harding file. It's gone." The sense of triumph I'd felt just 10 minutes ago evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp terror. He knew. He knew we were onto him. And he wasn't just a smooth-talking con man. He was violent. As I stood in the wreckage of the office, my phone vibrated in my pocket. An unknown number. I answered it, my hand trembling. "Hello? Looking for your homework, teacher?" The voice. It was him. But the warmth was gone. The fake charm, the smooth whiskey baritone, all of it was stripped away. This voice was flat, cold, and full of menace. "Dominic. Theodore." "You're in over your head, Matilda," he hissed. "You and your little glorified meter maid. Did you really think it would be that easy? You should have just stayed quiet and felt stupid, like the rest of them. You hurt him," I stammered, looking at Phillips. "He'll live. It's a warning. You're an old woman. Go back to your books. Drop it. Or the next time I clean house, I'll be much more thorough. I know where Mitchell works, Matilda. I know where you buy your groceries, A for effort. But you're in the big leagues now, and you just failed the class." The line went dead. I stood there, phone in my hand, my smoking gun gone, my only ally injured, and a direct threat hanging over my family. I had lost. He had won. I took Phillips to an urgent care. He had 2 cracked ribs and a broken wrist. "He was professional, Tilly," he kept repeating. "He wore gloves. He never spoke. He just dismantled everything." I drove home in a daze. I had to call the women. I had to tell them the evidence was gone, that he was on to us, and that he was dangerous. The conference call was devastating. Evelyn and Josephine were terrified. "He's going to come after us," Josephine wept. "Matilda, what did you do?" "She did what she had to," Rowena snapped, but her voice was shaky. "We're back to square one. We have nothing. No file, no real name we can prove. Nothing." I sat in my living room, the silence of the house pressing in on me. He had won. He was right. I was just an old woman who should have gone back to her books. Then my doorbell rang. I froze. I wasn't expecting anyone. My heart hammered as I crept to the door and looked through the peephole. It was Priscilla Chambers. She was alone, and she looked grim. I opened the door, my hands still shaking from the call. "If you're here to say, 'I told you so,'" "I'm not," she said, cutting me off. She held up a thick, old-fashioned accounting ledger. "I still don't know if I trust you, Matilda, but I'm not stupid, and I'm not a coward." I stepped back, and she walked into my living room. "After I left here," she said, "I couldn't sleep. You and him. It all brought back too much about my Aunt Madeline. I accused you of being his partner." "I know," I said flatly. "I was angry," she continued, "but I was also thinking, if he conned my aunt and he conned us, maybe there's a connection. I went to her storage unit, the one my family has been paying for since she died. It's full of her old things. It took me 2 days, but I found her diaries, and I found this." She placed the ledger on my coffee table. It was filled with neat, old-fashioned cursive. "He didn't just steal from her," Priscilla said, her voice vibrating with a cold fury I recognized. "He used her. She was his first lead wife, but not as a partner, as a victim. He used her to launder his money." She opened the ledger. She thought she was investing for him. He convinced her he was a spy or some kind of secret government agent and that he needed clean accounts. She wrote down every account number he gave her, every routing number, every transaction. "It's all here, Matilda, a complete map of his offshore accounts from 10 years ago. It's his entire financial network." I stared at the pages, at the columns of numbers. "Priscilla, it's better than your file," she said, her eyes glittering. "Your file was what he did. This is what he has. This is his entire empire. He stole your evidence? Good. This is the one thing he never knew existed. This is the weapon he can't defend against." She finally looked me in the eye. "I was wrong about you. I came here to accuse you, but I see it now. You're just like her. He broke my aunt's heart, and then he broke her spirit. She died ashamed, thinking she was a fool." Priscilla tapped the ledger. "I don't care about the $40,000 he stole from us. You want his money? Fine. I want his life. I want to see him in a cage. Let's work together and burn him to the ground." The fear that had been strangling me for hours was suddenly replaced by a surge of pure, cold adrenaline. I picked up my phone. "We're not going to a local police precinct," I said. "We're going to the FBI." The meeting with the FBI was like something out of a movie. We sat in a sterile, gray conference room at the federal building, facing a woman with intelligent, tired eyes named Agent Justine Weston. I told her everything. The con, the 7 women, the PI, the stolen file, the assault on Phillips, the threatening phone call. She listened patiently, her face giving nothing away. I could tell she was skeptical. I was just another emotional victim, rambling. Then Priscilla pushed the ledger across the table. "This is why you should care," Priscilla said. "This is the financial ledger of his previous victim, Madeline Chambers, my aunt. It details a network of offshore accounts in Portland, the Caymans, and Switzerland." Agent Weston opened the ledger. She read a page, then another. Her eyebrows shot up. She picked up her phone. "Get me Agent Riley from Financial Crimes, now." 10 minutes later, Riley and 2 other agents were in the room, poring over the ledger. This name," Riley said, tapping a page. "Theodore Harding. We've been tracking offshore assets tied to this name for 5 years. We always thought it was a shell corporation. But these account numbers, this routing, my God, this is the key. This connects him to a dozen fraud cases we thought were dead ends." Agent Weston looked at me, her skepticism completely gone, replaced by a sharp, focused intensity. "He threatened you, Mrs. Stafford." "He did," I said. "He told me to go back to my books. He threatened my son." "Good," Weston said, a grim smile playing on her lips. "That means he's arrogant. He thinks he's won. He thinks you're terrified and broken. We're going to use that." The plan came together quickly. It was simple. It was brilliant. It was all mine. "He's expecting me to be a terrified old woman," I told Weston. "He's expecting me to be quiet. I'm going to give him exactly what he wants." That night, I sat on my sofa, my hands trembling, this time for real, and texted him from my phone. Me. "You were right. I'm scared. I'm in over my head. I just want this to be over. Please, I won't tell anyone. I just need to see you. I need you to explain. Please, Dominic, don't hurt my son." The reply came back almost instantly. The arrogance rolled off it in waves. Him. "Knew you'd see reason, Matilda. You're a smart lady. Just scared. I'll come by tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. We'll talk it through. Just you and me. And delete this conversation." "He's coming," I said to Agent Weston, who was sitting at my dining room table with Priscilla and 2 techs. Tomorrow. 8 o'clock. He's walking right into the trap, Weston said. My team will be in a surveillance van across the street. We'll have audio and video. Mrs. Stafford, your only job is to get him to talk, get him to confess, get him to mention your aunt, she said to Priscilla. The moment we have what we need, we move in. Oh, he'll talk, I said, looking at Priscilla. He won't be able to resist gloating. Friday night, 8 o'clock on the dot. My doorbell rang. My living room was arranged like a tribunal. I was in my favorite reading chair. To my left and right, in a semicircle, sat the other 6 women: Evelyn, Josephine, Sabrina, Rowena, Loretta, and Priscilla. They were silent, their faces hard. In the surveillance van across the street, Agent Weston and her team were listening to every sound from the half-dozen microphones hidden among my books and decorations. I took a deep breath and walked to the door. I opened it. Theodore Bartholomew Harding stood on my porch, holding a bouquet of roses. He was wearing the charming Dominic Prescott mask again, his blue eyes soft with fake concern, his silver hair perfect. "Matilda, darling," he said, stepping inside. "I'm so glad you called. I was so worried about you." He stopped dead. His eyes moved from my face to the 7 women sitting in my living room, waiting for him. His face cycled through a fascinating range of emotions, from confident charm to utter confusion to dawning, visceral horror. It took about 3 seconds. "Surprise, darling," I said sweetly, closing the front door behind him. "We thought we'd save you the trouble of multiple apologies." The roses slipped from his hand, scattering on my entryway floor. "Ladies," he stammered, his voice no longer smooth. I can explain." "Please do," Evelyn said, her voice like dry ice. "Start with explaining why you told Josephine you were a retired ship's captain when you told me you were an investment advisor. And why you told me you were a former Navy SEAL," Rowena added, crossing her arms. "You don't look like a SEAL." Theodore looked around the room like a cornered animal searching for an escape. I adapted my background to what I thought each of you would find appealing." "You mean you lied more efficiently?" Sabrina corrected, her voice shaking but strong. "The lies are just the beginning, aren't they?" I said, walking to the coffee table. I picked up the stack of bank statements. "Let's talk about the money. Josephine, would you like to read the transaction details for the $2,500 he borrowed from your retirement account?" "ATM withdrawal, October 15th, Josephine read, her voice gaining strength. "While I was making you dinner, you bastard. While I was telling you about my grandchildren. I was desperate," he shouted, dropping the act. "I needed money." "For what?" Loretta interrupted, speaking for the first time all evening. "For the $12,000 you stole from my checking account? For the credit cards you opened in Evelyn's name? For the loan you took from Rowena that you never intended to repay?" He looked genuinely broken now, his charm and confidence completely drained. I never meant for it to go this far." "But it did go this far," I said, "and it went much, much further." Priscilla stood up. She was holding the ledger. "Stop talking, Theodore," she said, her voice deadly quiet. "We know who you are, and we know about Aunt Madeline Chambers." The blood drained from Theodore's face. That was the name he feared. That was the ghost. He stared at the ledger in her hand as if it were a snake. How did you—" "She kept records," Priscilla said. "She wrote it all down, every account, every transaction, all the money you laundered through her. We know about the accounts in Portland. We know about the shell company in the Caymans." Theodore Bartholomew Harding stared at the ledger, and in that moment he knew the game was over. The mask didn't just slip, he tore it off. His posture changed. He straightened up, and a cold, arrogant sneer twisted his lips. The pathetic cornered man was gone. In his place was the predator. "So you found it," he said, almost laughing. "Her little book. I looked for that stupid old woman. She really thought I was some kind of spy. She was my aunt, Priscilla whispered. She was a fool, he snapped. They all are. You think you're smart? You're just 7 lonely, stupid old women who are desperate for any man to look at them. I've been doing this since I was 19. You think you're special? You're not. I don't even remember half their names. 200 victims? Try 500. 500 women who practically begged me to take their money. You're not victims. You're just gullible. I looked at Priscilla. Her face was pale, but she nodded. I looked toward the front window at the dark van across the street. "Thank you, Theodore," I said, my voice perfectly calm. "That's all we needed." Theodore's arrogant smile faltered. "What did you say?" I walked to my front window and pulled back the heavy curtain. Through the glass, we could all see the black surveillance van parked across the street. Its side door slid open, and 4 people in dark suits and vests emerged, moving quickly and quietly toward my house. "I'd like you to meet Special Agent Justine Weston," I said, "from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. She and her team have been listening to our entire conversation." Theodore shot to his feet. You set me up, you bitch, you set me up." He lunged toward the kitchen, maybe for the back door, but Priscilla and Rowena blocked his path. "We set you up," I corrected as the doorbell rang. "All of us together." The look of absolute, profound betrayal on his face was almost comical. After a lifetime of manipulating trusting women, he simply could not process that we had turned the tables on him. "You can't do this," he yelled, backing away as I walked calmly to answer the door. "I trusted you. I told you everything." "You trusted us?" Evelyn scoffed, her voice filled with contempt. "You stole our money, our dignity, and our trust. You don't get to use that word." I opened the door. Agent Weston stood on my porch, her face grim. "Mrs. Stafford, I'm Special Agent Weston. I believe you have a suspect for us." "He's in the living room, Agent," I said, stepping aside. "And he just confessed to running cons on approximately 500 elderly women over the past 39 years. He also just confessed to laundering money through Madeline Chambers." "We heard it all, loud and clear," Weston said as she and 2 other agents brushed past me. "Thomas Bradley Hutchinson," Weston said, addressing him by his real name. "You are under arrest for wire fraud, mail fraud, identity theft, and money laundering." Thomas tried one last desperate manipulation. As an agent pulled his hands behind his back to handcuff him, he turned to me, his eyes filling with real tears this time, tears of self-pity. "Tilly, please," he begged, his voice cracking. "Maggie, what we had... that part was real, I swear it. I really did care about you. About all of you." I studied his face. The face I had once thought was so kind, the face I had cooked for and kissed. I looked for any sign of genuine emotion, any flicker of authentic remorse beneath the practiced desperation. All I saw was a hollow man, a man who had spent so many years lying that he had forgotten what the truth even felt like. "No, Theodore," I said gently. "You didn't. You didn't care about us. You didn't care about Aunt Madeline. You didn't care about any of them." I stepped closer to him, close enough for him to see the cold clarity in my eyes. "But you taught me something important. You taught me to care about myself. And that's the one thing you never counted on." Agent Weston read him his rights as they led him out of my house, past the roses he had dropped on the floor, and into the night. 6 months later, I sat in the front row of a federal courtroom, the dark wood paneling polished to a high sheen. Theodore Bartholomew Harding, wearing an ill-fitting orange jumpsuit and looking 20 years older than his 58 years, stood motionless before the judge. Priscilla sat next to me, clutching a framed photograph of her Aunt Madeline. On my other side sat Evelyn, Josephine, Rowena, Loretta, and Sabrina. The 7, as the press had dubbed us. We had all flown in for this day. "The court recognizes," Judge Hemlock said from the bench, his voice echoing in the quiet room, that the defendant's crimes have caused immeasurable financial and emotional harm to dozens, perhaps hundreds of victims across multiple states. The judge looked down at Theodore with undisguised contempt. The systematic targeting of grieving widows, seniors, and other vulnerable citizens represents a particularly cruel and parasitic form of predatory behavior. It is the finding of this court that you, Mr. Harding, are a man without remorse, without empathy, and without a conscience. Theodore stared straight ahead, his face a blank mask. However, Judge Hemlock continued, this court also recognizes the extraordinary courage and ingenuity shown by the 7 women who orchestrated Mr. Harding's capture. Their actions, taken at great personal risk, have not only brought a master criminal to justice, but will undoubtedly prevent countless future victims. They turned their pain into a public service. He banged his gavel. On all counts, this court sentences you, Thomas Bradley Harding, to the maximum allowed 25 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole. A collective sigh of relief, a series of stifled sobs went through our row. Priscilla squeezed my hand, her knuckles white. After the sentencing, Agent Weston found us in the courthouse hallway. She was smiling. "Ladies," she said, shaking each of our hands, "I wanted you to know your case has officially become a model for how we work with elderly and vulnerable fraud victims. We're already teaching it at Quantico." "Teaching what?" I asked. "The Stafford Protocol, we're calling it," Weston said. "Community-based victim cooperation with federal law enforcement support. Let the criminals think they're still in control. Let them get arrogant, while we build an airtight case from the inside. You all taught us a new way to hunt these predators." Evelyn chuckled. "Sounds like something a group of retired teachers, nurses, and logistics VPs might come up with." "Exactly," Agent Weston said. "Thank you again for your service to justice." We walked out of the courthouse and into the bright, blinding light of a spring afternoon. We stood on the top step, 7 women who had walked into hell and come back out, changed. Priscilla turned to me, the photo of her aunt held against her chest. "So, what now, Tilly? Back to your books and your quiet retirement?" I thought about it. I thought about the quiet, lonely life I'd had before Dominic Theodore. I thought about the terror, the rage, and the adrenaline of the last 6 months. I discovered strengths I never knew I possessed. I'd forged friendships of iron and fire. "Actually," I said, a smile touching my lips, "I've been thinking about starting a new support group. Not for grief this time." They all looked at me, waiting. "I want to start a group for fraud victims. An action group. To help them understand they're not alone, that being victimized doesn't make them weak or stupid. I want to teach them how to fight back. I want to teach them the Stafford Protocol." Priscilla was the first to speak. "Count me in. Aunt Madeline would have loved that." "And me," Evelyn said immediately. "All of us," Rowena said, speaking for the group. I looked at these remarkable women. Theodore Harding had thought he was hunting the weakest members of the herd. He thought he was preying on lonely, vulnerable widows. Instead, he'd awakened a force of nature. He'd created a pack. "You know the best part?" I said, as we walked down the steps and into the rest of our lives. "He probably thought he'd broken us. He thought we'd spend the rest of our lives feeling ashamed and foolish, hiding in the shadows. Instead," Priscilla said, slipping her arm through mine, a grin spreading across her face, "we're just getting started." As I drove home to my house where I lived alone by choice and not by circumstance, I thought about the final lesson Theodore had inadvertently taught me. He'd shown me that I could survive betrayal. He'd shown me that I could fight back against injustice, and he'd shown me that at 63, I was not a victim. I was not a prop. I was not a stupid old woman. I was a force to be reckoned with, and anyone foolish enough to underestimate a retired English teacher and her friends did so at their own peril. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.